Hi, and welcome back to We're Here Too, a podcast about mental health and life abroad. My name is Francesca. I am an Italian counsellor who's been living abroad for nearly 2 decades now, and I am currently in Scotland. This season is all about relationships, the ones we have with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. And in this episode, I want to talk about something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, which is finding stability in something bigger than ourselves. So let's get started. When I talk about stability, I don't mean a fixed state of stable versus unstable, okay? Like, I don't talk about that dichotomy or that specific binary. Stability is more like a sense of steadiness that ebbs and flows. So, for example, some days that steadiness feels strong, like you're standing on firm ground, and other days it's shakier, more like, walking across stepping stones where you can only see the next step ahead. So you really have no idea. I believe that's a continuum, not a box we sit in. And when we approach stability this way, it gives us more space to meet ourselves where we are and to meet us there in a way that is non-judgmental. Like, with the feeling of I'm aware this is what's happening, and I may feel how this can feel not steady, but this other part can feel steady, and I'll allow myself to be in this space, and I welcome it and see what happens. So that's where it stands for me. And finding steadiness is particularly important because it allows us to respond to life events and circumstances and people from a place of certainty and assuredness rather than reactivity. So let me share a bit more about this because I think this is quite important, and what helps us feel steady can vary. So perhaps it's moments of calm, feeling supported by others, and even our connection to nature. But it's important to remember that even when we feel grounded, life can still feel hard, and that's okay. And that's what I was saying earlier. Stability doesn't mean life is suddenly easy. It just means that we trust that we can meet whatever comes our way and know that the discomfort is temporary. This kind of steadiness gives us the resilience to keep going, even when things feel uncertain. And also, when we are in a place of non-reactivity, we feel like we have more things under control, even though maybe the entire situation is not fully in our control, but we do have a perceptions that we are, and we can use that at our advantage. We are able to think more clearly. We're not overwhelmed by the situation, which means that we have more energy. We are more present to connect to others and the situations and find solutions that would benefit us better in the long term. Because I just want to put a pause here that, even when we act from a reactive place, we do find solutions that suit us. They suit us in the short term usually, because we hope that we're not going to feel that way all the time, and then maybe some of the things that we put in place may not fit us anymore, when actually when we work from a place of steadiness and self-reassurance and presence, then we are much more able to think even long term and to act with that in mind. At this point, you may wonder, how does this connect, Francesca, to relationships and this entire season? Well, okay, I do believe that when we feel untethered, so we are disconnected from ourselves, our relationships often feel the impact. And it's harder to connect meaningfully with others when we're overwhelmed or uncertain inside. And that stability isn't just about feeling steady for ourselves. It's also what allows us to show up with clarity and compassion and presence in our relationships. So whether it's a friend, a partner, or even a casual interaction, finding something steady to hold on to can make those connections feel less fragile. I also want to say something about fragility because feeling unsteady doesn't mean you're fragile or that you're sabotaging your relationships, okay? When we are struggling and feeling untethered, it's easy for self-doubt or even self-loathing to seep in. And that inner uncertainty that I'm sure we all know can sometimes spill into our connections with other, and it may show like questioning whether people really care or by pulling away without meaning to. But this doesn't mean that the relationship itself is fragile, okay? Or that you're failing in some way. Often, that is just a sign that you need something to anchor you and a reminder that you are still grounded, still whole, even in difficult moments. As I've mentioned in a previous episode about identity crisis, maybe that's the time where we are reconsidering the entirety of our lives, and that's where we don't feel steady. But also that's an opportunity for us to really think about in relationships what it is that I do need to keep going. And those conversations are incredibly important, but it's important for you to know, like, I am feeling ungrounded and I need that right now. And use all of these as signs to be like, maybe there is something more that I can do for myself that I need. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that, relationships and our communities do share some responsibilities in supporting us, but also it's about us identifying when sometimes our because of our life circumstances and struggles, our perceptions of what's going on in our life is tinted, and maybe we need like to regroup and reconsider and feel okay within ourselves so we can engage with the outer world in ways that do not overwhelm us necessarily to the extent of questioning literally everything and maybe spiraling down even more. I'd like to share a story with you about a time I felt adrift. It was just after the pandemic lockdown had lifted and my world had reopened, but my support network had shrunk and I found myself carrying a lot of fear. Fear around relationships, around the world, and even around myself. That quiet confidence I used to feel, so trusting what was around me was actually gone, completely gone. I was terrified to even drive like outside of the city I was living. And then sense of, belonging in others, the one that used to make me feel safe, seemed to have vanished too. And at that time, I couldn't quite make sense of it, even from a body perspective. My body was signaling fear, but I couldn't bear to meet it. So I distracted myself from those sensations, like stepping back from a fire that felt too close, if you know what I mean. And, then one day I was offered the chance to join some further training in wilderness therapy. And for a few days, on that training, we camped together, we cooked communally and spent time quietly with nature, bare feet on the grass, sitting by the fire, walking without lights to reduce light pollution. So we would just walk in this beautiful forest in the darkness, and then learning that our eyes can actually adjust to the darkness. And I remember this one moment, just standing there. I wasn't trying to make sense of anything. I just let the steadiness of that moment, the presence of others, the quiet rhythms of nature hold me. And it felt like something bigger than me was carrying me. And that was enough. I wasn't fixed, but I felt steadier, like I could breathe again. And in that moment didn't erase my struggles at all, like they were still there, but it gave me something to lean on when I felt too tangled up inside myself to make sense of things. And I've learned since then that there's a lot of power in those kinds of anchors, like not because they solve anything, but because they give us something solid to reach for when we feel like we are drifting. And so I personally learned that to feel better, maybe relationships are really scary for me, but spending time in nature isn't. And so I started spending more and more time again in nature and reconnecting with what I really needed. And it wasn't my local park anymore, because during the pandemic I started to dread my local park, but I started like going a bit farther out of the city again, and I would do this in very baby steps, like I wouldn't try to drive 5 hours out of things. I would just like, okay, maybe I can go to my closer loch and spend time there looking at the water, or maybe I can go camping in one of those like camping permits that you can buy here in my local national park, where you spend very little and you can park close to the car, and it's very close to Glasgow. And I can, I don't know, go to another forest like 20 minutes away from Glasgow by car and walk there. So I find ways that are very easier for me to achieve, to actually be out there and spend time in nature. You have no idea the number of times that I was like setting myself to go with a goal on how I wanted to spend time in nature, and then finding myself like sitting on a rock in a forest and just look around. And I find it so peaceful at a time where that didn't feel peaceful at all for me. And that was really, and that really confirmed, what I've known all along, that nature was there for me. I suppose that the point of this story is that, loneliness can often creep in when we feel disconnected from ourselves. It's that sense of not quite belonging anywhere and feeling like you're on the outside looking in. And in those moments, finding stability in something outside of ourselves can really help bridge that gap. And for me, the anchor has often been nature, like walking outdoors, feeling the ground under my feet, and really noticing small details, the way the light filters through the leaves, or this, like even at home with my home plants, like how you have like tiny leaves, like, shooting off like the soil or from the stem and being all curled up. And then, day by day, they open up a bit more, and then they take a space, and then they participate in this beautiful like foliage. This is like, it all reminds me that life is still moving even when we feel stuck. And, for others, that anchor may actually be like culture. So things like language, music, or food that connect us to where we come from or what feels familiar. There's comfort in those small moments of recognition. And I remember once, back in the day, so we're talking about over like a decade ago, this friend of mine was sharing how much, for example, she loved to live in a household full of people from her country, because she was like, I'm spending so much time during my day speaking a language and hearing a language that is not mine, that I need comfort coming from language, coming from sharing the same cultural subtleties and understanding the world from the same, shared stories. And although at the time I was not understanding that, because I was in a completely different stage of my life abroad, where I was just like, no, cut bridges with everything. You need to focus on what matters. You're here, the level of like adaptations where you completely destroy your other identity that actually helped you to survive up to that point, so you can make a decision to leave. Like, clearly two different standpoints, and I genuinely do now understand my friend when she mentioned that at the time. And then I would say that another anchor that we find outside of ourselves is around the rituals, so small and intentional acts that help us feel grounded. So it could be lighting a candle in the evening brewing a tea in a particular way, or even something as simple as making our bed each morning. Rituals do not have to be profound. They just need to be steady. They need to be consistent. And so basically that's what it is. Whenever we feel disconnected from ourselves, what it is that is allowing us to anchor ourselves. And I find it's quite important to actually combine a bit of like, what do I need to look at internally and what I need to bring in from the outside world, so I can actually find balance. Because realistically, we not live in isolation. We are interconnected to everything around us. So it's very important that we consider all of this when we look into how stable we feel and how grounded we feel, and how secure really we feel in our everyday lives. So if you are feeling a little lost right now, know that you don't have to hold it all alone. Stability doesn't have to come from figuring everything out inside yourself. As I said, sometimes it's about finding something outside of you, like a tree or a song, like a morning ritual, something that feels steady enough to lean on for a while. And from there, your opening and grounding can slowly start to return. And I'd love to leave you with a question. What's one small thing, one external anchor that's helped you feel steadier in the past? Maybe it's a place, a practice, or even a person. So take a moment to reflect on that. And if you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for spending time again with me. And in the next episode, we are going to find how all of these things that we've explored in the first 3 episodes of this season, they are coming together. And until then, please take care and remember, you are here too.